Welcome to Sixth Day We Speak, where we don't just talk about transformation, we make it possible. Think about the last time you faced a decision that looked simple but felt heavy. Hiring someone, investing in a tool, stepping into a new opportunity. That mix of urgency, pressure, and fear of choosing wrong is familiar to all of us. Most people try to push through that moment, but high stakes decisions don't respond to pressure, they respond to clarity. That's why this framework exists to slow the moment down, cut through the noise, and reveal the real decision beneath the overwhelm. Today, you're stepping into a system for personal evolution, a shift from survival mode choices to intentional, elevated decision making. Because life changing decisions aren't driven by motivations, they're shaped by architecture, the architecture of your values, needs, priorities, and internal alignment. Introducing the five pillar framework. This isn't theory or motivation, it is a strategic, practical, deeply human system for people ready to stop reacting and start designing. These five pillars act like structural beams, ensuring your decisions are clear, not conflicted, aligned, not scattered, powerful, not pressured, strategic, not emotional, transformative, not repetitive. When these pillars lock into place, you stop choosing from fear or fatigue and start choosing from strength, intention, and elevated self awareness. This is the shift from trying to change your life to actually changing it. Let's begin. Now that you understand the why, let's talk about the journey we're stepping into today. First, we'll look at target audience, who this framework serves. Next, we'll break down how the system is built, the five pillar framework itself. Then we will apply that architecture to your work life, exploring how it transforms executive productivity. And finally, we'll take it home, literally. We will walk through how the same architecture transforms your home and family life. By the end, you will see how one architecture, one way of thinking, can elevate every part of your life. Before we step into the architecture itself, let's get clear on who this framework is built for. Because high stakes decision making isn't for everyone, it's for the people whose choices carry real weight. Indecision is the quietest and most expensive drain on a legacy. And the leaders who feel that the most are the ones the system is designed to support. First, the visionary founder, the person building something bigger than themselves, someone who needs mental space for long term vision, not daily friction. Next, the relentless optimizer, the leader who wants a clean, reliable way to evaluate decisions and move forward without second guessing. Then, the high net worth professional, the individual whose time is their most valuable asset and who wants to reclaim 10 or more hours a week by eliminating low value tasks. And finally, the family leader, the person balancing two worlds, wanting smoother transitions, fewer micro decisions, and more presence at home. These are the people this framework serves. The ones who can't afford hesitation because every hour lost to uncertainty is an hour stolen from high leverage work. Now let's move into the five pillars, the architecture that protects your clarity and accelerates confident action. Now that you know who this framework is built for, let's step into the architecture itself, the five pillar framework. Pillar one, isolate the objective. We begin with the truth. What problem are we actually trying to solve? Not the noise, not the symptoms, the root bottleneck. Pillar two, identify the solution. Once the real bottleneck is named, the question becomes what removes it with the least friction? Not the perfect solution, the right one. The one that frees your time, energy, or mental load the fastest. Pillar 3. Validate the ROI. Here we test the return. Is this decision optional or essential? If it buys back time, reduces mental strain, or strengthens clarity, it is not luxury, it's leverage. Pillar 4, reversibility and risk. Here we stress test the choice. What's the worst case scenario and can you handle it? If the downside won't break your system and the decision is reversible, the risk is small and the action becomes obvious. Pillar 5, define the financial parameters. Here we check the numbers. Does this decision fit the budget rules you've already set? If it does, the decision is pre-approved. No guilt, no negotiation, no emotional bargaining. This isn't a framework for people who view life through the lens of cost. It's a blueprint for people who see their life as a series of strategic investments. When you move through these 5 pillars, decisions stop feeling heavy and start becoming clear, aligned, and confidently executable. Now we step into the first pillar, isolate the objective. This is where decision making truly begins, with ruthless clarity. Because if you don't know the real problem, every solution becomes guesswork. Let's walk through this together. First, we look for the pain point, the thing you feel, the frustration, the drain, the tension that keeps showing up in your day. What feels heavy? What feels annoying? What keeps tugging at your attention? Pain points are the signals. They tell us something underneath isn't working. Next, we look at the symptoms. How is this showing up in your day? Is it the constant task switching, the inbox pulls, the interruptions that scatter your attention? Symptoms are breadcrumbs. They point us toward what's actually stealing your clarity. And then we identify the impact zone. Where is this friction hitting you the hardest? For most people, it's the deep work window. Those sacred hours where your clearest, most strategic thinking lives. When that window breaks, everything breaks. Your creativity drops, your decision quality drops, your energy drops. This is why isolating the objective matters. Because once you know exactly what's blocking you, you stop reacting and you start designing your next move with precision. Let's explore the second pillar, identify the solution, which is to identify what will remove the bottleneck with the least resistance. High stakes decision makers don't chase perfect solutions. They choose the move that creates the fastest, cleanest release of pressure. So, how do we do this? First, identify the bottleneck, the deeper friction underneath the irritation, the real source of overwhelm. It's almost never the thing you complain about first. It's the hidden constraint that's quietly slowing everything down. Then come up with some possible solutions that immediately stop the pressure from stacking. And then you choose the best fit that protects what matters most. Example, your highest value hours. Your best thinking lives in those protected windows. If a solution defends that space, it's a strategic win. If it doesn't, it's a distraction dressed as productivity. Identifying the solution is about precision. You're not trying to fix your entire life. You're removing the one block that frees your capacity, your clarity, and your power. This is how you build momentum on command. Now we step into pillar 3. Validate the ROI, return on investment. This is the moment where emotions step aside and the numbers take the microphone. At this level, we don't make decisions based on feelings. We make them based on return. Because time is the only asset you can never get back. And anything that buys it back is an indulgence. It's operational necessity. If someone else can do a task for less than the value of your time, that isn't a luxury, it's leverage. This is the point where high stakes decision makers separate themselves from the overwhelmed and the overextended. Let's zoom into what Pillar 3 forces you to ask. The reframe. Is this really a cost or is it a buyback? Am I spending money or am I purchasing clarity, energy, bandwidth, and hours of my life? ROI isn't just financial, it's cognitive and emotional. Second is the calculation. What is the true value of the hour I'm losing or the hour I could gain? If the exchange produces more value than it costs, the decision becomes obvious and immediate. Finally, the yield. What do I gain when I remove this bottleneck? Focus, energy, strategic capacity. Every high level choice either generates momentum or drains it. This pillar ensures the math works in your favor. Validating the return on investment turns decision making into a precision instrument. When the numbers tell the truth, hesitation disappears. At this stage, you're not guessing, you're calculating. You're not hoping, you're optimizing. Can I handle the worst outcome? Pillar 4 is where fear loses its power. When you can see the downside clearly and measure it with logic, the decision stops feeling dangerous. High stakes decision makers don't avoid risk. They define it, contain it, and then decide with confidence. Every decision has a floor, the lowest point you could hit. Your job is to assess that floor honestly and ask, can my life, my finances, or my system absorb this? If the answer is yes, fear is no longer a factor. 3 risk checks. Number 1, reversibility. Is this a one-way door or a two-way door? Meaning, if it doesn't work, can I undo it or recover quickly? Most decisions are far more reversible than we assume. Number 2, worst case outcome. What is the actual worst case, not the emotional one? If everything went wrong, what would happen? And can I handle that? When you evaluate the floor rationally, fear evaporates. Number 3, risk level. Does the downside break the architecture of my life or simply inconvenience it? Most risks don't destroy anything. They just require adjustment. Reversibility and risk aren't here to scare you. They are here to set you free. When you know the floor, the ceiling becomes easier to reach. Confidence doesn't come from eliminating risk. It comes from understanding it. Define the financial parameters. Does this fit the budget rules? Pillar 5 is where emotional spending ends and the disciplined leadership begins. This is where we remove impulse, remove guilt, and replace both with structure. High stakes decision makers don't rely on mood, they rely on preset rules, and those rules make the decision for them. If the cost fits inside the financial architecture you've already designed, the decision is already approved. No debating, no justifying, no second guessing. These rules exist to protect your clarity and eliminate emotional negotiation. 3 components of Pillar 5. Preset boundaries. You set the limits before the moment of decision, not during it. Decisions made under pressure or decisions made poorly. Clear boundaries create objective choices, not reactive spending. Second, the audit. Does this choice fall inside the money plan? Not your mood, not your fears, not your guilt, the plan. The audit removes emotional bias and forces alignment with your financial architecture. And finally, the status. If it fits, it's a green light. If it breaks the boundary, it's a hard no. No mental gymnastics, no maybe later. The system decides. This pillar eliminates gray areas and ends decision fatigue. When you define your financial parameters, you take back control. You stop making decisions from emotion and start making them from alignment. And in high stakes leadership, alignment is power. Now, let's bring the five pillars into the business world and start with one of the most consistent drains on executive performance: email and scheduling. This is where leaders lose hours without even noticing, and where clarity becomes a competitive advantage. Before we talk solutions, we start where every strategic decision begins, with the objective. And the real problem here isn't email. The real problem is the hours you lose inside your inbox, sorting, flagging, coordinating, rescheduling. You begin your day reacting instead of leading, and your deep work hours evaporate before you even sit down. Objective is to reclaim strategic thinking time by eliminating the daily drain of email and scheduling management. And once the objective is clear, the next pillar becomes the natural next move. Now that we know what we're solving for, we shift into the second pillar, identifying the solution. And in this case, the simplest, highest impact move is to stop being the operator of your inbox. Offload the sorting, offload the scheduling, offload the coordination. These are operational tasks, not executive tasks. This can look like an executive assistant, a scheduling service, automated triage tools, preset routing rules. The right solution removes friction and gives you back the mental space you've been losing. And once we see the solution, we move straight into the numbers. Pillar 3 asks a simple question: does this move pay for itself? If you're losing 10 to 15 hours a week to email and your time is worth far more than the cost of delegation, this is no longer optional. You're not paying for help, you're buying back time, the most valuable asset you have. And when the ROI is that clean, we check the next safeguard. Pillar 4, reversibility and risk. What's the actual worst case scenario? The assistant isn't a fit, the system doesn't gel, you pause it and regroup. This is a two-way door and easy to undo, easy to adjust. Nothing breaks, nothing collapses. When the risk is small and reversible, momentum continues. And that brings us to the final pillar: define the financial parameters. Pillar 5 is where discipline replaces emotion. You already set financial boundaries for operational support. If it fits the rules, it's a green light. If it doesn't, it waits for the next financial window. This is what strategic decision making looks like. Identify the real drain, choose the cleanest solution, buy back your time, protect your genius, and turn every decision into a power move. Now, let's take this architecture home, literally, because one of the biggest drains on your energy isn't happening in the boardroom. It's happening in your kitchen, your laundry room, and every corner of your house. At home, the drag looks different. It's the constant cycle of cooking, cleaning, tidying, laundry, and daily tasks that quietly erode your mental bandwidth. These aren't just chores, they are the invisible load that steals your creativity, fractures your presence, and eats away at the recovery time your leadership depends on. So we begin with the pillar 1, isolating the objective, which is remove the daily home task drain so you can reclaim energy, focus, and family presence. And once we see the real objective, the next pillar becomes the natural next move: identify the solution. And in this case, the simplest, highest leverage move is to stop being the sole operator of your home. This can look like hiring a housekeeper, hiring a cook or meal prep support, bringing in help 1 to 3 times a week, using a cleaning service, outsourcing laundry, using meal prep delivery for weekday evenings. The right support removes the chore load and gives you back the mental bandwidth your leadership requires. And once the solution is clear, we move into the numbers. Pillar 3 asks a different question. Is this optional or essential? If home tasks are consuming 10 to 20 hours a week, and those hours are your recovery time, your family time, or your creative thinking time, then it's no longer nice to have. Hiring help is an indulgence. It's a strategic investment in your energy, your relationships, and your mental clarity. Return on investment includes more quality time with family, lower stress, higher energy for high value work, mental space instead of constant depletion. And when the return on investment is that strong, we check the next safeguard: reversibility and risk. What's the real worst case scenario? You hire someone and the fit isn't right. Then you pause, adjust, or try a different service. This is a two-way door, meaning easy to undo, easy to refine. Nothing breaks. Your life absorbs the change effortlessly. When the risk is tiny and the upside is enormous, the decision becomes obvious. And that brings us to the final pillar: define the financial parameters. You've already created financial boundaries for household support. If this falls inside the limit, the decision is already made. No guilt, no hesitation, no internal argument. Your system says yes, so you execute the yes. Hiring help at home isn't about avoiding work. It's about protecting your energy for the work only you can do. Freeing yourself from daily tasks isn't a luxury. It's what allows you to lead, to think, and to live at a higher level. Thank you for being part of this journey. Your presence here matters. If today's session brought clarity or shifted how you think about decisions, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe so this work reaches the people who need it. Your feedback shapes where we go next: the questions you ask, the challenges you face, the topics you want to explore. Connect, share your insights, and stay in the conversation. Every step you take toward designing your destiny becomes a signal to someone else that change is possible. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and continuing this journey with you.